Welcome to the Kingsburg Community Church podcast, Thinking About Faith. We pray that this podcast helps you deepen your faith in God and stir some inner thoughts about the Christian life.
Hi, and welcome to our Thinking About Faith podcast. I am Ricky, and I get to do an interview today. This is our first interview-style podcast we're doing here at KCC, and I'm so excited to invite Rick Schuil to the podcast from Schuil Ag and what is it called?
Schuil Ag Real Estate. That's okay.
Schuil Ag Real Estate. I just keep wanting to say associates. Schuil Ag Real Estate.
Well, let me interrupt you. That's okay. We were Schuil and Associates Real Estate for 40 years. We rebranded recently, so we answer by both names. How's that?
Perfect. Thank you. So I wanted to invite you on here, Rick, because the podcast Ed's been addressing questions about thinking about faith. And I thought it'd be cool to address the questions about thinking about faith in the workplace. Many of our listeners are listening to this podcast while they're driving and doing their commute to the office. And so this is a kind of a neat time for them to think about their faith in the workplace. So to start, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do for a living?
I'd be happy to. I'm going to go back to when I was Ricky Schuil.
Yes.
Grew up in Dinuba. I think a little bit of history is appropriate because it leads into what I do today. So if you'll, I think we have enough time to do that. So grew up in Dinuba. My father was in sales, had a car dealership. He was the youngest Ford dealer in Dinuba in the 60s. We lived in a split level house like the Brady Bunch. I had two older sisters, two twin brothers, and then myself. We were all jammed within 5 years, so it was a close-knit family. And then my father went broke in 1967. So I was 7 years old, sitting out in the front of our house watching the movers take our furniture out, and we moved into a very humble abode across town, still stayed in Dinuba. And keep in mind, that was before MasterCard and Visa, and that's back when going broke meant that some of your accounts downtown might have been put on hold. Mm-hmm. I have a lot of memories with my mother. I was the youngest, and I loved my mom. And I would go downtown, and we'd go to J.C. Penney's, we'd go to Moto Day, we'd go to Dawn's Shoes, Lyle's Drugs, the Firestone stores where we got tennis shoes. And Mother would sign the ledger and the charge account, and then at the end of 30 days, she'd go pay the bill. Well, things changed dramatically when the dealership closed and my father had to go find work. And I think that impacted me a great deal as a young man. Mom went back to work. She was a stay-at-home mom until then, and she was had her teaching credential. And she went out to a little town of Cutler out in Tulare County, and she was what they call a resource teacher. And she reinvented herself and had a good 25-year career. But I was one of the early latchkey kids. I was at Lincoln School in Dinuba, had wonderful teachers. I thought school was terrific, but I thought being out of school is even more terrific. Had a lot of friends. That's back when Dinuba was a lot like Kingsburg. Mm-hmm. I had a red Schwinn Stingray, and I had the run of the town. As long as I was home for dinner and nobody called and said that I was misbehaving, I had a great little childhood growing up that way. I'm getting to a point here. So back when I was probably 10 to 12 years old, I found out that I like to buy and sell. And my friend Russ, his family lived down the path from our house, and they had a garage sale one Saturday morning. And I went and cleaned out the back half of our garage, and I was selling things unbeknownst to my family. And my poor sister Jan, to this day, I think she's forgiven, but she hasn't forgotten. I sold her Schwinn bicycle.
Oh, no.
And at the time, I just thought I was being a good little merchant. Now, did I split the proceeds with her? Probably not. I'm going to be real honest. But I think I found out at an early age that I just kind of dug commerce. Yeah. I thought it was fun. I had as I got to be a little bit older, I would drag the lawnmower around the neighborhood, and I would mow neighborhood lawns. And at the time, it was $3.50. And I would accumulate enough money. I always wanted a goat. I just thought having a billy goat would be the cat's meow. So my dad, in his wisdom, took me goat shopping. And he took me to the meanest, orneriest billy goat that he could find. And that changed my mind. I never had a billy goat, but I went and spent my money on, I don't know if you remember, Cox airplanes. The little trainer planes on the end of it had a motor, a 2-cycle motor on the edge of a string, go round and round.
Oh,
anyway,
cool.
My brothers and I, we were hobbyists for a while with that. And then when I was in junior high school, I landed the coveted job of washing windows at the local's Foster's Freeze. And I can tell you who my boss was to this day. It was Rocky Hale. And he was a true Foster's Freeze franchisee. Big guy that wore white clothes and a white apron and a white chef's hat. And for $3.50 every Saturday morning, I'd ride my 10-speed to the Foster's Freeze before it was open and make my $3.50 and drink all the Pepsi I could. Anyway, that's kind of what set my path as a young man, I think, into business. I always knew I'd be in business.
Yeah.
Now, I'll let you lead into your next question on how faith and how that all intertwines. But that was the beginning of me understanding money, commerce, and the way things work, both good and bad.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Yeah. Your poor sister and her bike.
It still is a topic to this day. I still bring it up.
It's a great story. So how did you get into the line of work you're in today then?
Okay, so the fast forward, went to Emmanuel High School in Reedley, went to, it was just kind of a given. I was the youngest. My oldest sister, who I sold the bicycle, Jan, she went to Reedley College. My brothers went to Reedley College. I went to Reedley College. Yeah. It was, I hate to say it, but it was probably the path of least resistance. Family didn't have a whole lot of education funds. It wasn't put out there for me to go to, any UCs. I came home one day, and Brooke Schaefer, a family friend who was a little bit older than me, had gone to UCLA. And I thought that was cool. So I came home one day and said, I think I'm going to look at UCLA. And I think my folks thought I said, I'm going to send a spaceship to Mars. That just was not going to happen. Yeah. We were not going from Dinuba to Los Angeles into UCLA. So off to Reedley College, took business classes. My brothers were already at Fresno State, taking finance and marketing. They encouraged me strongly to get an accounting degree. Rick was not motivated enough to put the time and effort into accounting. So I took general business and then transferred up to Fresno State, and I also got a marketing degree. Knowing I wanted to be in business, my father was not college educated. He always looked at college as get out of there as fast as you can and get to work. Mm-hmm. That was kind of his view of college. Didn't put a whole lot of value on it. Anyway, it was a good experience, made good friends, still have friends from Fresno State. I'm still a Bulldog booster. But Fresno State was a good experience. I was not the campus crusader. I will tell you that. I took a bit of a break, maybe from my faith during college, and traveled a bit wider road during that time. But as soon as I did graduate, I landed in Reedley, of all places, at the local True Value lumberyard and hardware store as a 22-year-old manager. Now, imagine yourself at 22 years old walking into this archaic family-run business, fresh out of college. And I had a lot of energy. Anyway, I transformed that crazy little store into and that's just when home centers, that was before Home Depot. Yeah. And I was kind of a visionary in that way. And I turned that whole thing around and went from a little store to a warehouse store and had quite a bit of success. But found out I did not like to manage people. I like to create and execute. And I found out early that was where my gifts were. So I lasted a couple years there and then ventured out, went to an entrepreneurial spin for a couple of years and then landed at Merrill Lynch, of all places, in a cubicle with a suit on and a tie. And I was in their training program. Now I'm probably 25 years old, maybe 26, not yet married, but engaged to Nisha. And I came home one day. No, we were recently married. We had already been married because I came home. We were in an apartment in Fresno. And I said, honey, I don't think me in a cubicle is going to work out. This doesn't feel quite right. Now, mind you, this is the 80s. This is when, what was the Wall Street movie with Michael Douglas, where it was all about the money. There's a lot of money being made. This is post Jimmy Carter. This was Reagan years. And I was all about the money myself. That's why I went into Merrill Lynch. I wanted to be a stockbroker and make the money. Yeah. That movie will come back to me.
I'm not sure.
Oh well.
Yeah.
Anyway, a Wall Street movie, and that was the culture of the day. So I came home and I told Nisha, I said, "Hon, I don't think this is going to work out." We had first baby Risha on the way.
Yeah. And
she kind of looked at me and said, "Well, we have some obligations here. What are we going to do?" Now, my family had started Schuil and Associates, my two brothers, Mark and Mike, and Father Elmer, in Dinuba back in 1983. And there was always an open door for me, but I was out sowing my own oats. I didn't say wild, but maybe they were. But I wanted to make my own way. So now we're fast forward to 1986, and I went and had a meeting with my father. In the house I grew up in. I can still remember Nisha was with me, and I shared that. I said, "Hey, I think I'm ready to join the family business." At that time, they had opened up a few satellite offices. Dinuba was the main office, had an office in Reedley, and they had just ventured into Kingsburg without any real leadership. And we had Nisha and I had the option of staying in Fresno and doing an office in Fresno. And for some unknown reason, we chose Kingsburg. We had no roots here, really knew nobody in Kingsburg.
Yeah.
And maybe that was God's leading. I don't know. But we took a tour of Kingsburg, and the Fjords apartments, which are right down the street, were fairly new. And they were pretty cool, if you want to know the truth. And we looked at those and we thought, hey, that would be a good place to live and we can get started in business. So I met with my brothers. I got a hand-me-down Oldsmobile Cutlass. Now, for those of you that are listening, that's if you can think back to 1980, this is a blue four-door sky blue Cutlass with bad shock absorbers in the rear that kind of hung low. And they gave me a Beacon credit card. That's before Valero gasoline. And put me on a small draw. I think it was $1,500 a month. And if you don't know anything about real estate, it's a commission-driven business. If you're not selling, you're not making money. So it was a sink or swim proposition. Now, remember, have a baby on the way, moving to a new community, have a grass credit card, so at least I can limp around town in my hand-me-down blue Oldsmobile, and I have an office on Draper Street, and I brand new licensee. I just got my license, so I was not a seasoned vet, but it was time to get to work. So that's what brought us to Kingsburg. That was the opening, and that's back when we were Schuil and Associates, and we were 1427 Draper. I'll give a quick shout out to Nina Thiessen. She's with me to this day. If you can believe it, still works for the company. But Nina and I pretty well started almost together in Kingsburg on Draper Street.
Wow.
Yeah. Kind of fun to talk about.
Yeah, that's incredible. So that was your first venture into real estate, was when you came to Kingsburg.
Yes. And it's interesting. In real estate, it's really about relationships. It's about who you know, and we've got a saying in the company, if people like you and trust you, they will do business with you. If people like you and don't trust you, they won't do business with you. If people don't like you but still trust you, they'll probably do business with you. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today is about relationships. It'll be about trust. Part of being a realtor, which we are, is there's what's called a code of ethics. So what's different than being an ethical businessman versus a businessman of faith? And we'll probably jump into that later in the podcast, I'm assuming.
Yep. So being in real estate, looking back now, is this something that you feel or felt that you're called to push towards in some way?
Yeah. No calling.
Yeah.
No calling.
Yeah.
Had a baby on the way, had to provide. And again, I always knew I would be self-made. I don't know why. I just assumed that's the way I was going to be in life. I had no desire to work for AT&T. I had no desire to work for PG&E.
Yeah.
I didn't see myself as a corporate guy. I tried it at Merrill Lynch and saw that wasn't the mold I was going to be in.
Yeah.
I think the fact that I had a runway, an opportunity, so I think it was more of a push-pull than it was a calling. My family didn't beg me to go to work for them.
Yeah.
They weren't dying to have me come in, but the opportunity was always there.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about my brothers and my family, we have always been faith-based. I grew up in the Christian Reform, which is part of the Dutch Reform, Calvinistic theology. From there to the Danuba Presbyterian Church, again Calvinistic. Did youth group there. I have a lot of compassion for youth group leaders because I remember what I put my youth group leaders through as a junior hire. But yeah, it was definitely our company was founded. My brother Mike, who was our broker president for many, many years, we would open our staff meetings with prayer, some scripture, and then maybe some lead in with faith-based sales tools, et cetera. But that was for a solid 25 years of my mentoring with my brothers. That's the way we were trained.
And so, and you mentioned in college there was a period of maybe prodigal a little bit, kind of going off a little bit from your faith foundation. When would you say that turned around and it was you're all in your faith?
Yeah, good point. Good point. So the what's the Amish call them? Rumsprugger?
Yeah.
What's the term? It's something like that.
I don't know the term.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I might have extended mine a little long.
Yeah.
And then Nisha, who's my wonderful wife now of 38, going on 39 years. We had a baby. We had a new career. We had a new community. And it was time for Rumsprugger to end.
Yeah.
And we then, it's interesting, we did return to the Danuba Presbyterian Church, and Henry Green, great pastor, a lot of respect for him. We attended there for probably 2 years as we lived in Kingsburg. And then mutually we decided we need to join a local church. And at the time, the Baptist church was full of people my age.
Yeah.
It was happening.
Yeah.
Rusty Lyon was the lead pastor my age. Rick Robbins was the music leader. Rick had a lot of good things going on. And so we really were drawn into the community of Kingsburg, if you will, through the Baptist church.
Yeah.
And had a wonderful time there. I was instrumental. I was in leadership. We had a young pastor, so we have a young board.
Yeah.
I was part of that group. And then it was interesting. I don't know if this matters to you, but I'm going to say it anyway. So I'm at a Christmas performance sitting in the audience, and I'm watching and thinking, well, those people are having a lot of fun. So the next year I joined the Christmas choir and was in the third row. I don't know if Kevin's listening, but he might smile at this. And then the next year I was in the second row and had a bit part on a quartet. And then I was actually in one of the Christmas programs, was a co-lead and I think I sang my first solo at 40 years old.
Wow.
So interesting how church and leadership and all those things. But I built a lot of my local business. And I'm going to go back to what I talked to 5 minutes ago about relationships.
Yep. Yeah.
And so you talk about, well, Rick, is that your faith or is that your community?
Yeah.
And I think the short answer, if I have a short answer, I haven't given you a short answer yet on anything, But I think the short answer is your faith is your community.
Yeah.
And when you and I discussed this, I was trying to come up with, well, what is am I a Christian businessman? And I don't know if that is a good lead. Because a lot of people are immediately turned off when you lead in with I'm a Christian businessman. They want to know that, number one, that you're working in truth. Well, that aligns with Christian. They want to know that you're transparent. Well, that aligns with Christian. They want to know that you're ethical. Well, most people that I deal with are ethical. Does that mean they're Christian? Not necessarily. So there's a line that I think we'll explore in our talk. What does it mean to be a Christian businessman?
Yeah.
Or is it that I'm a businessman in a Christian faith? So anyway, let's. I think we'll unravel that as you ask me questions, because I'm not sure where we're going to go with that, but that's kind of the turning point, I think, of our conversation right now. Yeah.
So I guess that kind of leads me into the next question is, what are some practical ways, I guess, that you have seen, you have done, you have integrated your faith into your workplace, maybe not necessarily calling yourself a Christian, businessman, which to your point, it's like, well, what exactly does that mean? What is that accomplishing? More, what I'd love to hear is some of the practical ways your faith does work out in your workplace, just maybe naturally, maybe it's something that you've done intentionally throughout the years. What does that look like?
Okay, so I'm going to go back to my days when I was building my business. People know me now as a 65-year-old commercial agricultural broker. I've got a long history how I got here. I was the guy. Go back to my Oldsmobile. I had open house signs after church in the trunk of my car, and I was sitting in open houses on Sundays. Yeah. For those of you in Kingsburg long enough, it used to be hard to sell a home in Kingsburg. Properties would linger on the market, and you would have to, you'd have to do your darndest to get a buyer, and that meant sitting open houses on Saturday afternoons and Sundays, and doing the heavy lifting. And I go back, Chet Jern, Bill North, old elders of the Baptist church would come in, and I'd have coffee with them. And I'm probably at the time, put me at 35, maybe 37, 38, because I probably had all 4 children by then. But it was again, going back into real estate. Keep in mind, there's no salaries. Nobody's paying. There's no grantor just because you have your own business where they bless you with money every month. You have to earn it. Yeah. So anyway, it was. I'm going to use the word struggle. Nish and I bought our first house before Dirk was born, but Annika was born. So I was probably 32. How old was I? No, Risha was 20. I was 27. So I was 29. And we actually house sat for a client for 6 months out on Rose Avenue. They had a big sprawling ranch house. Wow. And they just wanted the home sat. So we didn't pay rent for 12 months. And I accumulated $7,500. And we did an FHA loan, and Nish and I built our first home together on Birch Court. And I can remember we moved into that house with the money that was basically set aside by living rent-free. And it was the Wilsons. What was their first name? It's a lifetime ago. And then we lived in that house for 2 years. And then I came home one day and told Nisha that we're moving. I sold it for $125,000. We're rich. And again, that's back when, things were, real estate was much different. Yeah. And then we bought a rental house on Tulare in a little bit rougher neighborhood, and built our second home on 19th in the Bon Air Estates. And that was moving up in Kingsburg. That was a big deal. And Dirk, to put that in perspective, Dirk is now 30. Dirk came home as a baby to that house. So that's been 30 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. So I digressed. I'm sorry, but we go back.
It's okay.
Back to what the question was.
Yeah. So as you're slowly grinding, putting in the work, making these moves, what are some of the ways that you've seen practically putting your faith into practice in your work and what you're doing, and maybe dealing with the people you're dealing with? If you've got employees, how is it that you've been able to see your faith at work in a practical sense in those areas?
Faith and work. So being in the commission-driven business.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I do. And in the relationship business, because if you don't know people and people don't want to have a relationship, business and or personal, there's not much business to be had.
Mm-hmm.
So in the early days, I recruited a half a dozen female agents, most of them part-time in town, and then one male agent, Bob Gardner, who is still is a friend of mine. Bob had come out of the farming business, was 20 years older than me. Seemed like a lot older at the time, but probably only 20 years older than me at the time. Had already raised his family and was starting to have grandkids at the time. And so I managed a small office of agents. And, that's all about relationships. I mean, they're working on commission. They're splitting with the house. Well, guess who the house is? Me. My name is on the sign.
Yeah.
So there was always an element of trust, relationship, faith. Now, did I have a fish on the bumper of my car and an ICTO sign on my business card, hoping that would lead to more business? I never did that. I never felt that was a calling card. I wasn't convicted in that way. Now, other businesses have been very successful that way. You and I have coffee twice a month at our local coffee shop.
Yeah.
And obviously, they wear it firmly on their sleeve, and I have a lot of respect for that. But that wasn't how I built my business. I felt that my faith would manifest itself in my actions, and I was comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Now, if I was with a Christian brother or sister that wanted to pray about their transaction at their kitchen table when we were listing the property for sale, I was all about that.
Yeah.
I was very open and very accommodating. But I didn't lead with my faith. And I still struggle to this day. I'm doing significantly larger transactions with more sophistication. But I still struggle. Is God? I don't pray to God to close a deal. I pray for God's wisdom.
Yeah.
I always feel His will be done. I pray that I'm a good steward with the resources that I do have. But I do struggle with God's really blessed my business. I think God blesses us with our talents.
Yeah.
And if you look in the Bible, in the Old Testament, Joseph raised to high authority.
Yeah.
And God placed him there. There was a reason for that. And if you go to the New Testament, the model's way different. I struggle with the book of Acts because I'm not quite sure I want to sell everything and go join the commune. And that's a fact when you're dealing in money.
Yeah.
And the early church, they took care of each other.
Yeah.
Now I'm all about tithing and making contributions for our growth locally.
Yeah.
But sometimes I struggle with living in a big house and driving a nice car, as it relates to the New Testament and what is being a good steward and what is success and what are those things in this world that we live. And being in business, I'm immersed in it.
Yeah.
I think it's a little easier being the Christian coffee shop than it is being the, we generate $500 million worth of transactions in a year's time.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
So I come across all kinds of different people, all kinds of different cultures. I'm an international businessman now. I deal with a lot of the Sikh community and the Persian community. And I just stay true to my values. I stay true to my faith. It's interesting. I have shared my faith on multiple occasions with my Sikh friends.
Yeah.
And their response is always very good. We all worship the same God. And that's their response. But they're not that interested in me telling them about Jesus.
Yeah.
They're not that interested. I always like to share with them. I don't always call it our Bible. I say, well, our book says, because they have a book.
Yeah.
A book of prayers and readings. So I've yet to convert anybody from Sikhism to Christianity. My Persian friends, I think they are mostly Muslim. And we have a mutual respect. But it's interesting how they don't want to engage my faith. And they don't want me to engage their faith in reality.
Yeah.
They're mostly about business. The Persian people, the Muslim people we forget this. Our country is 250 years old. Their culture is 5,000 years old. So it's interesting, and I've learned a lot from them how they think different. They are long play people.
Yeah.
Whereas Americans, if we don't make money in 1, 2, or 3 years, let's move on and try something else. But they're very long play people. Anyway, it's just I'm not sure where I'm going with on that, but I deal with all different types of clientele today.
Yeah.
And mostly high stakes.
Yeah. You touched on something interesting about the faith of the Sikhs and the Muslims that you've worked with. You've seen them try to distinctly separate their faith from their business practice in some ways.
And without throwing stones or being disparaging, they rate monetary success, not just success, but monetary success, very high.
Yeah.
Very high. So to talk about humility and service and being a servant, to them, servant leadership makes no sense.
Yeah. Yes.
The tough guy, the hard guy, the iron fist rules. And now going back into the business that I am in the service business.
Yeah.
When I broker real estate today, let's say it's a section of almonds, 640 acres, at $6 million. We'll just throw a number out there. I don't go out and buy that piece of property and then market that piece of property and hope I sell it at a profit. So I provide a service to the landowner. The landowner may be an individual. It may be a corporation. It may be a private equity company from the East Coast that only comes out here and looks at the property twice a year.
Yeah.
So our level of involvement is so much different. But being in the service business, there's several that do the same service that I do.
Yeah.
So I have to differentiate so that they use my services, Schuil Ag Real Estate, Rick Schuil, or Phil Heinen in the office, or Arno Koster, or Doug Phillips, whoever happens to be the rep in my company handling it. But we have to do something better, something different, something more innovative. Are we more ethical than the other companies? Is that why they use us? Probably not. Are we more honest than the other companies? Probably not. Are we better at relationship building than the other companies? Maybe. But what are we better at that sets us apart to do business with other people? Is it our faith in Jesus Christ? Is it the fact that we have a firm foundation? Maybe it is. But is that measurable? I don't think it is. Yeah. So that when you said, well, let's have this conversation, I thought, well, it's going to be interesting to have this conversation because I'm going to verbalize some things that I'm maybe not as convicted about as maybe Ricky thinks I am.
Yeah.
So interesting.
Yeah. No, that is. And some of those intangibles, you can't measure that.
everything in my business is almost intangible.
Yeah.
I'm in the marketing business. I happen to market agricultural properties.
Yeah.
But if we spend $1,000 sponsoring a podcast, is that measurable on how many buyers that we generated? Or do I spend that $1,000 on postcards? Or do I spend that $1,000 on local radio? There's an old thing that people don't even know about anymore called newspaper. Newspaper used to be our biggest medium.
Yeah.
We spent tens of thousands of dollars annually on newspaper. Well, that's gone by the wayside.
It's gone. Yeah.
Now we're sitting here in front of microphones talking to each other in a podcast. So we've evolved. The company has evolved. Business has evolved.
Yeah.
You and I talked earlier. I think churches are evolving right along with us. Anyway, that's a whole nother topic. So I'll let you move on.
Yeah. Well, so talking about, some of those ways that your faith does work out in your business that isn't as obvious to outsiders who aren't Christians, who might not understand things you're wrestling with a lot. We've talked about, you're thinking through, your faith in your work, and sometimes you see it apply, sometimes it doesn't really apply. But there can be a lot of tough ethical decisions often in running a business, owning a business, doing real estate, doing ag real estate. These decisions need to be made by someone. Do we cut this corner? Or do we do this thing? How does your faith, how have you seen, how does it help inform your thinking and some of these maybe ethical dilemmas that might come up, questions like that?
Well, there's the old bracelet that you wore back in the 80s. What would Jesus do?
Yeah.
And I say that tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, if everything you do and say is through the filter of your relationship in Christ and through God, it shouldn't be that hard. It shouldn't be that hard for me. It shouldn't be that hard for you. It shouldn't be that hard for a school teacher. It shouldn't be that hard for the guy that climbs the PG&E pole. But then there's that funny thing that always comes right in and seeps through the cracks called temptation.
Yeah.
So who doesn't have that?
Yeah.
So is the is the businessman more tempted to do unethical things than the school teacher who leaves 15 minutes early?
Yeah.
But that's no big deal, is it? Yeah. Or the guy that's climbing the power pole and he does 2 clamps instead of the required 4 because it saved him 20 minutes and he gets to get home earlier. So business is often singled out as being under more ethical pressure. But in reality, I think you, the guy sitting across from me, or Bruce that just left, or John who's outside volunteering his time, maintaining the grounds, I think we're all faced with temptation.
Yeah.
And how you deal with that temptation is a reflection on the stability of your faith. Cheating. Well, what would cheating be? In my business, everything is accounted for. We have a third party look at all of our transactions.
Yeah.
It's called a title escrow company. So there's, I can't tell somebody I'm going to charge you a $2 fee and then suddenly slip a $3 fee. It's just going to come to light.
Yeah.
It's going to happen that way.
Yeah.
Now, would cheating be where I tell a client, do I overpromise and underdeliver to get the listing? Do I tell them that your ranch is going to sell for $1 million where I know for a fact it's going to sell for $500,000? Is that cheating? Is that unethical? Is that not being Christ-like? So I would say, am I faced with dilemmas on occasion? Am I faced with dilemmas often? Or am I faced with dilemmas constantly? I'd say it's constantly.
Yeah.
Every day, I probably take, my wife laughs at me, I don't know if I field 20 phone calls or 50. And every phone call, they have to be the most important person on that call. Whether it's the client who wants to know, hey, why hasn't my property sold? Whether it's the lender asking me, hey, is this ranch really worth what you've got it in contract for? Or whether it's the title company saying there's some things showing up on the title report that I don't think your seller might be aware of, that he's got maybe liens against the property or judgments that nobody's aware of. And how do I, as the quarterback of the transaction, the one leading, the all the different players in the transaction, how do I deal with those relationships? Whereas the transparency is number one, the buyer is fully aware of what's happening, but at the same time, not saying anything disparaging about a seller, even though there may be some disparaging things. And oftentimes I have to make those decisions on the fly. I mean, it's not, I can't go home and say, that's a good question. I'm going to go home and pray about it. I'll get back to you tomorrow. So much of our business has to go through your filter or you better be pretty stable in your faith because you can get kicked around. And once you start getting kicked around and compromising, every deal is going to be a compromise. Or I shouldn't say deal. Every transaction is going to be a compromise. So the way that I have built my personal business, the way that we've trained our staff in our office, I'm training my son, Dirk. He's been with me now for 2 years, is we are not in the business of compromise. Now, we are in the business of getting pieces to fit and solving problems, but we can do that, of course, ethically. We can do that within the parameters of our faith. And if you can't, my son and I fired a client this week. We opted to let him know that we don't have common viewpoints, we don't have common values, and it'd be best if we didn't work together. Now, if you want to monetize that, it was a fairly large listing sell, and that's how we get paid. So we do draw the line. Now, if you were to call the client and ask him how that went, he might say, that crazy Rick Schuil, I can't believe he walked away from this. What was he thinking? But at some point, if it's not good for all parties, we've been known to walk away and recuse ourselves from transactions. It'd be like you saying no to a new member. Everybody has a place. Rick, how could you not take care of that client? Well, at some point, we just weren't the right place. Now, will his property sell to somebody eventually? I think it will, and I think people will be satisfied. But for us and for our values, it just wasn't the right time. Did we think about the money? I can tell you're asking that. Of course we thought about the money. How do you not? But at some point you pivot. You decide if it's is it well with my soul? And if it's not, move on. That makes sense?
Thank you so much for joining us on our Thinking About Faith podcast. This interview is not over. There is still more to come. Join us next week for part 2 with our interview with Rick Schuil.